So during week one, we are going to start off with one of my favorite topics, Shinrin Yoku, or forest bathing. We'll begin the term with a focus on how stress affects the body, and forest bathing is one of those methods that is really helpful to reduce stress and increase your immune system function. So I'd like to start with this as this is something that you can essentially do whenever you're outside. And the weather is generally nicer at the beginning of fall term. We'll try to take advantage of that and hope that having a trip to the outdoors or an exclusive outdoor environment is going to be a little bit more fun when it's not raining. So how can forest actually be medicine? How can a stroll through the forest affect our overall health? And why does the natural world really affect our biological systems? Well, in part, it's because we are part of the natural world. So to address this topic, let's start off with some definitions. The term biophilia was first coined by a psychoanalyst called Erich Fromm, who described it as the passionate love for life and all that is alive. And then in 1984, the naturalist E.O. Wilson, who's one of my favorite people, then proposed the biophilia hypothesis, which is the idea that humans possess an innate tendency to seek connections with nature and other forms of life. So this was about the same time as the term Shinrin Yoku was coined in Japan. That was in about 1982. This was a common sense movement started by Yoshifumi Miyazaki, who's shown in this picture. And it's kind of a common sense movement that being in nature is necessary to maintain optimal health. So Yoshifumi has done many of the scientific investigations into the health benefits of forest bathing. And this started really in earnest around 2004. So even though the idea has been around since the 1980s, there hadn't been that much research done on it until the turn of the century. So this stems from the rich culture of Japan and its closeness with nature. You can see this in the rich Japanese gardens and how traditional homes are really integrated with nature. This is known as Shizen, which is one of the 7 principles of Zen aesthetics and describes that mankind is not separate from nature, but that we are an integral part of it and we should live in harmony with it. However, our modern life has made this quite challenging, especially in larger cities with high population density. For example, in Japan, approximately 78% of the Japanese live in the city. 11 million passengers ride the subway in Tokyo, called commuter hell, and the average commuter spends 3.5 years of their life on this underground train. You can see here that the doormen here are shoving people in, trying to squish them in as tight as they can be. Population density can also be felt in crowded hotel conditions, such as capsule hotels where you barely have room to sit up. The Japanese also have another interesting term that comes from overworking. It's called karoshi death, which is translated as occupational sudden mortality. In 2016, there was a cabinet-endorsed white paper that showed that 23% of Japanese companies said that their employees worked more than 80 hours of overtime per month and that some worked over 100 extra hours per month. And more than 200 people per year die from karoshi-related events in Japan. And more people are choosing to move to cities. Worldwide, since the year 2000, we have officially become an urban species. And by 2050, it's estimated that 75% of the 9 billion people on the earth will live in cities. So what impact does this have on our overall health? One consequence is that we tend to stay indoors more often. For example, in the United States, the average American spends 93% of their time indoors. 6% of the time is spent in a car, and only half of one day is spent outdoors per week. And amazingly, 10 hours and 39 minutes per day are spent consuming media. So the more time that we spend on computers and other electronic devices has created a new form of stress that's called techno stress. Some of the signs are checking your phone constantly, compulsively sharing updates, and feeling a need to be continually connected. This can lead to some stressful symptoms that include insomnia, depression, anxiety, frustration, irritability, and eye and neck strain. There's also a concept that's known as subhealth. Subhealth is also known as the third health condition or a gray state. It's a borderline state between being healthy and falling sick. So, in this critical state, you're actually not sick yet, but you don't feel well either. So, the immune system is weakened in this state, and you become more susceptible to falling ill. According to one investigation by the World Health Organization, or the WHO, 70% of the world population is in a subhealth condition. Furthermore, over 45% of the subhealthy people are middle aged or elderly. And interestingly, white collar workers are more likely to suffer from subhealth than blue collar workers that might be more physically active and working outside. So, some symptoms of subhealth can be things like fatigue, poor sleep quality, forgetfulness, some physical pain, and potentially a sore throat that won't clear up or go away. So, how can nature help? It turns out that nature is actually a potent elixir, and even small doses can help people feel happier, more vital, and have more meaningful lives. So, forest bathing has been shown to have many positive physiological effects that include reducing blood pressure, lowering stress, improving cardiovascular health, lowering blood sugar levels, improving concentration and memory, reducing depression, improving pain thresholds, boosting the immune system, increasing anti-cancer protein production, and increasing sleep quality. Forests are actually an amazing resource. They produce oxygen, cleanse the air we breathe, and purify our water. They can stop flooding, provide us with tools, clothing, and shelter, and they help us cure our wounds and diseases with the medicines we derive from them. And they improve our mood and mental health. So, how do they do all of this? So, we'll spend some time taking a look at a few studies from Yoshifumi Miyazaki and others. So, his group has performed studies over a number of years from 2005 to 2013. And in these studies that are summarized here, they have 52 areas that are picked out in Japan. Some of them are forested areas and some of them are city areas. So one important conceptual thing for studies is that you need to have controls within the studies. So they use the city areas as control areas to see if the effects are actually dependent on being in the forest. So they have 12 participants at each of these 52 areas for a total of 624 participants. The study was only done with university men with an average age of 21.7 and that they have similar health as indicated by their BMI. So here you can see some of their demographics. So here's some of their findings. So results from the people in forested areas are shown in green, whereas those in the city are shown in gray. So they found significant reduction in fatigue, anxiety and tension, and they found an increase in vigor in the participants that had stays in forested areas in comparison to people that were having maybe a small vacation or walk through the city areas. And we can see that these effects are at the biological level. So next week, we're going to start discussing stress at a deeper level and find that one of the key hormones involved is called cortisol. When cortisol levels are higher, we feel more stress. And you can see here that people participating in forest bathing had a significant reduction in their cortisol levels compared to those that were just walking through a city area or an urban environment. So this suggests that forest bathing can reduce stress. Forest bathing can also improve immune system function. In this study, both male and female participants spent a weekend trip in a forested area, or as a control, they had a weekend trip in a city or an urban environment. So the study measured several aspects of immune function, including levels of key immune system cells and other chemical markers. Measurements were made on the normal workday before the trip started, and then on days 1 and 2 of the trip, and then on day 7 and day 30 following the trip. They saw some pretty cool results. For example, the number of natural killer cells and natural killer cell activity increased during the trip. Even as soon as day 1 or day 2, they saw significant differences. And they saw these for other immune system indicators as well. And even more interesting, these were actually long-lasting effects. So the increase in the activity of natural killer cells was actually elevated up to 30 days following their forest bathing activity. And you can see here, there's the comparison to the people that were taking a city tourist vacation, right? And you can see that there's no increase in natural killer cell activity following the trip. So this is very interesting. The forest is actually, and being out in nature is actually required to see this immune system bump. If we look at another stress hormone, adrenaline, you can see that there's a dramatic decrease in adrenaline, especially for women that experience the forest bathing trip compared to people just having a city tourist trip. So these are some pretty cool results showing that you get an immune system bump when you're out in nature and having a forest bathing experience. Forest bathing can also improve psychological health. So up to 13% of the world population suffers from depression or anxiety. There's also been a rise in people experiencing PTSD and in panic attacks. Thus, forest bathing can be a tool in the arsenal to help combat these conditions. So if we look at people experiencing a 3-day forest bathing excursion, we can see that people felt an increase in vigor, and then all of these other characteristics, they saw a pretty dramatic decrease in these. So a decrease in fatigue, a decrease in depression, a decrease in anger, tension, and confusion following this forest bathing excursion. So overall, forest bathing can help with many different aspects of health, including decreasing blood pressure and heart rate, improving cardiovascular health. It also reduces stress and increases sleep quality, and it has many positive effects on the mood and emotional health. It also boosts the immune system and has some additional positive health benefits. So, as part of your homework for this week, I would like you to engage in some forest bathing. You don't have to take a 3-day trip to see these benefits. Certainly, the more time, the better. But even short nature experiences of 20 minutes or 1 hour can have a noticeable improvement for your health. So how do you start? So here's some tips when you start forest bathing. First, turn off your devices or leave them at home completely. Slow down. Move through the forest or the nature area slowly so that you can see and feel more. For forest bathing, it's not about a destination. It's about being in the forest and experiencing the forest. You want to take long, deep breaths. Try extending your exhalations to twice the length of the inhalation. You might count while you're doing this for the first few breaths. This will send a signal to your body that it can relax. Try stopping, standing, or sitting in nature and just experience the area. Listen to the sounds that you can hear. Smell what is around you, and look for the patterns that are inherent in nature. And once you have a little bit of experience, try going a little bit deeper. Take in your surrounding using all of your senses. How does the environment make you feel? Be observant. Look at the nature's small details. What do the pine needles look like? If you're at the beach, feel the sand on your feet. Sit quietly using mindful observation. Try to avoid thinking about your to do lists or what you're going to have for dinner later when you get home. You want to be focused on being in the moment. What's going on around you? Keep your eyes open. The colors of nature are soothing, and studies have shown that people relax best while seeing greens and blues. And stay as long as you can. Start off with a comfortable time limit and build up the recommended 2 hours for a complete forest bathing experience. You might try doing this on the weekend when you have a little bit more time. All right, so get out there and do some forest bathing.